Hi, I'm Kevin Hicks. Welcome to my YouTube channel, The History Squad. Now today's video is all about the Berlin Wall and it's been voted for by my Patreon members. Hey guys, thanks a bunch. And we're going to cover what the Berlin Wall was. When was it built? How was it built? Why was it built? And about some of the stories surrounding this whole subject. But there's an extra piece and I'm going to cover some of my own experiences, some of my stories as a British soldier who served both in Berlin and then down at Helmstedt on the East-West German border. Before we look at the Berlin Wall, you've got to go back to what caused it, really. May 1945, isn't it? The end of the Second World War. Germany is divided between the victorious Allies. There were four of them. The Russians, the Soviets, the Americans, the United States of America, the British, and the French. And the way Germany was divided is the Russians have the east, the British have the north, the Americans have the south, the French have a little bit of the west over there, southwest, and then of course it leaves Berlin, the capital of old Germany, stuck right in the middle of the Russian zone in the east. So Berlin is divided into four. The Soviets have the east, British have the north, the Americans have the south, and the French have a little bit too. But it was 1949 when things really started to change because people were moving pretty much between the east and west without very much problems. It was when the Allies, being the three Western Allies, the Brits, the Americans and the French, realised that we can't keep Germany divided. So West Germany was going to be formed into a single state. Now, there were lots of problems within Germany with this because nobody trusted politics. Hey, can you blame them? But it was going to happen, and their economy was going to pick up really quick as they forged themselves to rebuild this West Germany. Its headquarters or its capital city will be in Bonn, and it does very well indeed, and it becomes a threat financially to East Germany, the communist states. The Russians realise there is going to be problems. Tensions build, restrictions are actually imposed on the roadway, for instance, and that goes against the agreement that the four allies had at the end of the war. Berlin had to have a roadway, water access canals, rivers, and an air corridor. And the Soviets decided they're going to close them all down and they are going to starve Berlin. But they underestimated the Allies. The one thing they can't close down is the air corridor. This episode is called the Berlin Airlift. Now I remember it as a kid. It lasted for almost a year, June 48 to May 49, the Berlin Airlift. So transport planes, old Dakotas from the Second World War, anything that the West could lay its hands on, now brought supplies to Berlin from West Germany. We actually supplied an entire city with food and supplies, including coal. Planes with tons of coal were landing in West Berlin so that people could heat their homes. This is an incredible thing for me. And as a kid in England, I used to listen to this on the news, and of course, you know, planes would crash, there would be terrible losses. But when I was a soldier in Berlin, I remember an old Berliner telling me, so, oh yeah, I remember the planes coming in and how the pilots would hang their hands out the windows and drop handfuls of sweets, of candies to us. And I thought, wow, my goodness me, this is just unbelievable. But as things then move forward, the Berlin Airlift is successful. The Soviets relax their grip and things can get back to normal. You can call it normal, but there's an exodus now from East Germany, from East Berlin. With West Germany and West Berlin doing well, their economy is growing, there's more work. More and more people from East Berlin and East Germany either migrate over to the West or they actually have jobs in the West. In Berlin in particular, you could live in East Berlin and you could go to work in West Berlin. But the East German authorities realized that their workforce, their people, they're hemorrhaging to the West. They're looking for a better life under the West German government as opposed to the communist East German government. And this brings us up to the 1960s when the East German government realised they've got to do something to stem the flow of people out of East Germany. So they're going to build a wall. First of all, they build a wall around West Berlin. It was called Operation Rose, and it was an overnight thing. Only the serious heads of departments of the Stasi and the East German border guards knew what was going on, and of course the Soviets knew. Stockpiles of bricks, stockpiles of barbed wire, soldiers were on standby, but they didn't know what for until the orders were issued, and bang, 13th of August 1961, literally overnight, Operation Rose is put into action. West Berlin is completely surrounded by barbed wire entanglements, armoured cars, East German border guards and East German soldiers. The West was taken totally by surprise, and so were the inhabitants of East Berlin. They hadn't got a clue. There were dads still at work in West Berlin, and his family were asleep in East Berlin. This is a catastrophe. They did it in 2 weeks, the actual barrier, but then of course it will take many years to complete the Berlin Wall as we know it. And a lot of people don't realise what that barrier was. There was an inside wall. So if you were an East Berliner, you could see a wall. But over that wall then was a patrol track. Then you had tank traps. These were just the iron girders. And then sand, real smooth sand that would show any footprints. But there were also mines in amongst it all. And then you had the main Berlin Wall, very, very tall. Then it had a roll top on it so you can't grip it or put grappling irons on it. On the west side, of course, what they did was they gave everybody a canvas to do all their spray paints. But it's heartbreaking because when you go back to Operation Rose, families were literally severed, cut in half. And there are famous films of people waving from high points across to the other side. This really is a dark side of history, isn't it? The Berlin Wall. We know that at least, that's the known cases, 140 people lost their lives trying to get across the Berlin Wall. And one reflection is how desperate people were to escape the communist regime of East Germany, the DDR, the Democratic Deutsche Republic. People dropping 2-3 stories from the apartments that they had. I think we was on Bernauer Straße, was one of the famous ones where a woman hung by her fingertips, but the East German authorities had got her and were holding on to her. You can see that in a newsreel. How people tunneled underneath, and then the famous newsreel, you see people running through a hole in the barbed wire when it was first set up, and how one young lady catches herself and is jarred back. This is quite meaty stuff, but there was some fabulous incidents of one chap who shot an arrow across with his bow, you know, I really like that, across the Berlin Wall, and his accomplice reels in the wire, secures it, and the chap then zip wires across the Berlin Wall. One of the most exciting escapes from East Berlin for me was the Benck brothers. There were 3 of them. 2 of them were in West Berlin. The other one was trapped in communist East Berlin. This was a plan 4 years in the making. And the 2 West Berliners, they learned to fly. They had 2 ultralight aircraft, and they flew 25th of May 1989, so it's not long before the wall comes down. They fly over the Berlin Wall, land in a park, their brother, hidden, runs out, jumps on board, and they fly back over the wall. Wow, that is incredible. And I got one when that was passed on to me from another British military policeman about the young lad who ran at the wall with a ladder and literally climbed over amidst a hail of machine gun fire. There are so many stories about the positive escapes. But there's another side to this. The Berlin Wall, 140 dead as we know. There was the border between East and West Germany. It went from the Baltic all the way down to the south to the Czech border. This was minefields, booby traps, barbed wire watchtowers, and far more people died trying to cross that border than the Berlin Wall. And it's often forgotten. And my involvement in this whole thing incorporates both the Berlin Wall and the East-West German border. But there's some heartbreak here. Go back to Berlin, some real heartbreak of the failed attempts. Some of the failed attempts really are heartbreaking. The first one, the first recorded death, was Ida Siekmann. She was a nurse, 22nd of August 1961, and she was one of those who dropped from the buildings and was killed by the impact. But as a soldier in Berlin, there were always the stories of other failed attempts. The guy who tried to swim across the river not far from the Reichstag, but he lost direction and then went back and was machine gunned down in the river. These are such terrible things, but the two I'm going to bring to your attention. Peter Fechter, 18 years of age. He, when was it? August 17th, 1962. This is the most infamous killing on the Berlin Wall. It's not far from Checkpoint Charlie. So it's a crowded area, gunfire. His friend managed to get across the wall when Peter is hit, when he's actually at the wall, standing up against the wall. As he falls back, from what I understand, he's shot again and he is screaming out for help. West Berlin police drop bandages on him, trying to reach him, but this kid has been shot through and through. The East Germans won't come anywhere near him. And poor Peter was left to bleed to death. So he died literally at the foot of the Berlin Wall. Now, the last one is the two youngsters, they're children. Jorg Hartmann, 10 years of age, and his friend Lothar Schlesner. He was 13 years of age. This is March 14th, 1966. We don't know the ins and outs. They crept around a building apparently, get across part of the sand, the clear area, in an attempt to climb over the wall, when two different East German border guards machine gunned them down. In the evidence they gave, they saw shadows, and so they opened fire and they killed two children. One of them, I think it was the youngster, Jorg, he was being raised by his grandmother, who gave the alarm. He's not come home. He was out playing. Where is he? 2 weeks later, she finds out the official version is that he drowned and a motorboat ran over him, cutting his body to pieces. His body had already been cremated and buried. It's nonsense. And the West knew this because they'd heard the gunfire and informants from the East had let the story out. Two children had been machine gunned down on the Berlin Wall. So the city of Berlin was divided by the Berlin Wall for over 30 years. And then in November 1989, it's breached. And it's quite funny when you look at how come it was breached. There was confusion. The East German authorities were going to relax the restrictions. People could then travel to West Berlin. And there were traffic jams and crowds of people trying to get through. The border guards were confused and the wall was breached. You can see the newsreels. It was great news. And then come 1990, reunification of Germany. It's still going to take a long time for Germany to be fully healed because there is definitely a difference between East and West still. So my part in all of this history, the Berlin Wall, was I was sent to Berlin, posted to Berlin in the British Army, the Royal Military Police in October 1976. And wow, anybody at that time being taken around Berlin, it blows your mind. My first patrol, they says, we're going to go into the Reichstag. That massive building in the centre of Berlin there used to be the German government, been ruined in the battle for Berlin. And as you go in, there is a building inside the Reichstag. So if you just walk into the Reichstag, it looks really nice inside. And as we walk in, we go to a door to our right and we're in the old Reichstag. Bullet marks, shell marks, scrape marks, where the battle for the Reichstag had actually taken place. And all over, Russian signatures in Cyrillic there. I hadn't got a clue what they said. And then I was told, in here somewhere, a brother signed, I was here, May 1945. And underneath it, his brother says, I'm his brother, I was here too. And it was just, wow, the history of it was just blowing your mind. I was there, yeah. And then we go upstairs and our observation point overhung the Berlin Wall. You could just see the East German guards with their dogs. And then you could just see the Brandenburg Gate. The whole area there, floodlit. I had become part of the history of the Berlin Wall, patrolling down through the countryside, the back of Spandau and all of these areas. You were just stepping backwards and forwards from Second World War history into the Cold War history. They found a Russian tank. One of our guys tripped over something as he was running through the forest there. It was a German steel helmet from the war. It was just all around, and I was just so excited about being in Berlin, and I was just so enjoying it. It was, well, the nightlife, the history, the everything of this vibrant, exciting city. And then I was called up into the officer commanding's office to be introduced. Hello, sir, you know, all that kind of stuff. And he says, Lance Corporal Hicks, you're not stopping. And I immediately thought, what have I done wrong? I was posted out of Berlin, still part of Berlin though, down to the Autobahn Control Detachment at Helmstedt. That's the Autobahn that is the corridor from Berlin to West Germany. The British military police patrol it twice a day to keep it open, and that is the lifeline to Berlin from the west. And I pack all my kit, still a bit bewildered because I was kind of looking forward to a life in Berlin. And I meet two of the lads. I can still remember their names, and God bless them if they're still alive. Speedy Dams and Tom Palmer. They're going to take me down through communist East Germany. So on my arrival at Helmstedt, it didn't take me long to get myself established there. Our duties were quite straightforward. We manned checkpoint Alpha, allowing traffic in and out of East Germany to and from Berlin. We also had a police station, a military police duty room down in Helmstedt, and our little base there. But the most important job for me, I think, was the patrols to Berlin. 365 days a year, up and down, to keep the corridor open. It was called the sweep. And that's where you had some, I suppose, adventures. But it all becomes routine, doesn't it? And it was winter time when I had a real humdinger of an incident. It was snowing and it was blowing a gale, and we're driving up and keeping my eye on the road, and at the corner of my eye I saw a soldier waving at us, and I didn't recognise his uniform too well. And I says to my patrol partner, I said, did you see that soldier there? He says, yeah. He said, I think he was French. And I said, well, we best go back and have a look then, because they're on our side, aren't they? So blue lights are on. We go across the central reservation, we come down. Sure enough, there is a French soldier covered in snow, absolutely freezing. He didn't have a big duffel coat or anything like that. He was freezing, no parka, yeah. And he looked down in the ditch, in the snow. There was his staff car upside down, and hanging out of the door was a French colonel. He was badly hurt. On the radio, report what's happening, request ambulance, and request recovery. We must not let the East German authorities deal with this, because they could spirit away this French colonel. We might never see him again. So I go down, the snow is getting heavier, part of the road is closed off because of our vehicle is in the way now. When I saw the damage to this colonel's head, there was that much blood. Then your training kicks in, doesn't it? We bandage him up, we, you know, compressing and all that kind of stuff. We get the message that the ambulance is fully on its way. Got to try and keep this guy calm. He's half in the car, so we put a blanket over him. Cut a long story short, the ambulance arrives, he's whisked away. The driver is also whisked away, the chauffeur, because he's in shock and he's freezing to death. We now wait for the recovery vehicle, and eventually the biggest recovery vehicle you can imagine, with an overhead jib, arrives. We have the right to close off the road. We have to do this. The Magirus Deutsch recovery goes across the road, it extends its jib. The REME guys, the recce mechs, or the recovery mechanics, are hard at it, and the vehicle begins to slide, this enormous recovery vehicle. The road is actually covered in ice. The sleet is hitting us. There's big problems. And they asked me if I can just sit right by the back wheel there and just so they can focus on me. There was a problem. They couldn't see properly where the vehicle was sliding. They were trying this, that and the other. We've got the road stopped. And all of a sudden I felt something hit me there. When I turn around in the snow, it's Volkspolizei, East German police officer, with his pistol out, ordering me off the road. I explained as best I could, and he wouldn't have it. And I thought, he's going to shoot me. Things had all of a sudden gone from routine, bit of excitement, to, oh my God, I could die here. When all of a sudden a Russian soldier shouts at him. And it's a surreal thing. There's a British soldier, there's an incident, there's an East German police officer, and a Russian colonel. The East German soldier leaves, and the colonel just salutes and says, "Hello, Tommy," and smiles. We recover the vehicle, and it's put onto a low loader. I walk over to thank the colonel, who happens to have a couple of tanks further back, T-62s. And I says to him, you know, thank you very much. And he gave me a big smile and he went, "Benson and Hedges." And I smiled. Benson and Hedges was a make of cigarettes. So I'll crack out a couple of packets. I'd got a couple. And I give him a pack and we light up a cigarette together. He then literally just clicks his fingers, and out of this tank comes this Russian soldier and pours out some vodka. Yeah, because we were all freezing to death. The vehicle goes, we carry on our patrol. Fraternizing with the enemy. Were they the enemy? It's not allowed. So, because you get used to things, we would drive through the Russian checkpoints up to Berlin and not think very much about it. And we became familiar sometimes with the odd Russian soldier. And you could always tell when you just got a common Russian soldier, his uniform was just not the best fitting. If you saw a Russian soldier on one of the checkpoints who was immaculate and his uniform was tailored, you knew you had a specialist KGB. They were having a look. But with your ordinary Russian soldier, they would often, round the side of the checkpoint, they go, psst, psst, belt, belt. And they'd hold a Russian soldier's, a Russian army belt. And what they wanted was either some decent cigarettes or a mail order catalogue. We used to have like what they call the Grattan's catalogue, and they're great big thick things. But the reason they wanted them was they wanted the fashion, so they could send the catalogue home and their wives and sisters and that could actually copy the fashions from the West. But it was coming back from Berlin that I had an incident. I was bursting to go for a pee. So I went into the bushes near a place called Ziza, I think it was, and I'm having a pee and I can hear a tank not far away, and I thought, oh dear. And as I put myself back in order, this enormous tank, self-propelled gun, comes out of the bushes 20 feet away from me, and I didn't know what it was. I got back into my vehicle, spoke to my partner, and I said, I just don't know what it is. It's not a T-62. And I drew it. And I drew the specific points. Never thought anything more of it. Drove back down to Helmstedt, put in my intelligence report. Oh, by the way, I saw this. And the next day, I'm summoned to Berlin by the intelligence people. So I go up to Berlin and in I go, very sinister, didn't like it at all. These people weren't friendly, but they were British Army, British intelligence. And they sit me down and they put my report on the table. And they says, "What's this?" And I said, "Oh yeah, it's the one I saw yesterday." They say, "What's this bit here?" And then I went through all of the different bits of it that I saw. How far away were you? What colour was it? And blah, 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 blah. Then they showed me the photograph that they had of one part of one of these tanks. I went, yeah, that's it. Then they showed me another part. I went, yeah, that's exactly it. I says, have you not got the middle bit? They says, no. And then they says, you know what you've seen, don't you? I went, no. And they says, you've seen the new Soviet tank, the T-72. You're the first British soldier, the first Westerner to see the new T-72 tank. I spent 2.5 years in Helmstedt and Berlin in the Royal Military Police, and I had the most incredible time, I can tell you. Some amazing stories, far too many to tell you at the moment, so perhaps I'll do another video later on about Kevin's adventures in Berlin. But before I go, yeah, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the all notification button so you know what's coming down the line. And before I go, a quick mention for some of my Patreon members, yeah, PG Gilliam, Richard McPherson and Marco Engelbrecht. Hey guys, thanks a million.